I think we've got enough people here to get started, and it looks like we are already recording. Okay, so first up on the agenda is the discussion around essentially planning using issues, tasks, epics, or whatever. Um, Paul, I think since you brought this up in Slack, it would be good for you to lead the discussion from this point here.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So I guess just at a high level, we're starting to improve planning, make it more accurate, make it more actionable. And there's a whole bunch of initiatives on the go, including the planning issue. But as we start to do this, I think some cracks have started to show up. And one is that there are like issues that can't really be done easily in a milestone. So we want to get to a place where we are breaking work down so that it's achievable in a milestone, so that things are in general, getting opened and getting closed, so that we don't have stuff that spans multiple years, multiple milestones, stuff that doesn't have clear exit criteria, stuff that when you read it, you read the title or you read the description, you're kind of like, I'm not sure if this work is actually done, or this is an ongoing thing that will never be done. So in general, moving away from stuff like that where we can. And one place that this really comes up is the times when there's a single issue that covers multiple types of work. So it can be that design first needs to do the work, do some work, and then engineering needs to, maybe the order is switched, but there's work for both people. And of course, when you start to get into that, it's certainly hard to close the ticket in one milestone, right? It's also hard to know who it's assigned to. It's hard to weight it. It's hard to use any of the features of planning when there's just one issue for multiple types of tasks. So obviously we have epics, and then you can create issues. But epics they're bigger, or at least they feel bigger. And we also have issues, and we have tasks. We have child, issues. So we went back and forth in that Slack talking about a plan for this, which would see us for any issue that needs multiple streams of work, creating child issues or tasks. So that was the first kind of question: is if we're going to do this, which it sounded like we will, do we want to use issues, or do we want to use tasks for it? Do tasks feel lighter? They feel easier to use? And then the second question is, if we do that, if we create these child issues or tasks, where would we have like discussions? Obviously, everything is all interrelated, and it's not that hard to go up the chain to look at the parent. But do we want to have the related discussions in those child tickets? Do we want to force everyone to always discuss up in the parent ticket for visibility? It's more about like who has fields for each of these, and then just kind of saying in general, we want to move forward with um, a system where we're creating sub issues or tasks for individual breakdowns. So I just want to say, lastly, we use design and engineering, or design and dev, in the discussions, but it's not necessarily just that. So design can have multiple subtasks, so can engineering. Like if we want to do something where there's like an exploration for one milestone and then an implementation in another milestone, that's another use of these multiple tickets. Again, just getting back to that, we should be able to assign the actual scope of work in that milestone to you that you would then be able to complete, even if it doesn't fully complete the parent. It's actually better that way, right? We complete the tasks and then we can move on, rather than having this one issue assigned to you that we know can't be done in that milestone, and then it just becomes messy. I think we can go through the sub questions. Looks like Dan has some thoughts here. So I guess yeah, just first let's talk about the actual structure of it, like getting into using issues and sub issues or tasks. Dan, you got to hear from the past.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for working on this stuff as well. Uh, in the past, both at GitLab and at other places I've worked, I've seen issues and issue-like things like tasks be effective when there's clear scope and a DRI for a piece of work. But where I've not seen it work so well, or I'm less certain that it can work, is where the teams I've been on have had to figure something out together. So creating a plan for a thing or a higher level initiative. Example of that might be updating the typography, uh, determining criteria or scope. So figuring out an API for a component where the decision is design and engineering, because then it has to go out to design and engineering assets, or determining an approach for something. So like figuring out a structure for a component in our kind of cases. So yeah, when it's clear scope and DRI, I've seen it be really effective, but those other types of activities less so.
Yep, yep, makes sense. And is that more around the work of planning is hard to break into tickets? Or is it hard when you're doing the planning that you're talking about to create the full scope of tickets and follow this structure? Like, what's the actual part that's into this?
In this particular context and comment, I think it's the latter, and it's because of something that I think you mentioned earlier is there's things are very interrelated. So in our context, to determine a structure, we might also have to make decisions about things like properties or more general architecture of things. So when everything impacts everything, uh, these neat scopes and DRIs for things start to become a bit more blurry in my experience.
Okay, makes sense. The main thing that I like, I guess there's like an overarching like philosophy that I'd at least like to just push towards. I don't think we're going to go to like full on, super structured thing right away. But I just want to get to something where if we're able to break down work into chunk of work that an individual is going to do that is thematically similar, we should create some sort of structure for it. So the person, it can be assigned to them, they can do it, they can close it. And so I wanted to get to a point where like we're never going to have a team where Chris and I are like managing the GitLab issues and creating all the structures and doing all of the stuff in there. Like I want all of you to participate in it. So the way that that would work is if you're working on something and you realize, oh, there's another thing that I need to do here that is big enough to rise to the scope of an issue or a task, you would just create that, even if it's just a stub with a name. And then at least it's there and it's a child of some larger initiative. The idea being what I want to get to is we should be able to look at the planning. We should be able to say, yes, 60% of my time is shown on the 1810 planning under my name. That 60% isn't likely to move around. Chris and I aren't going to add another item to your plate midway through the milestone. We've had a lot of chaos in the past, and I'm trying to get a little bit of that under control, leaving 40% or whatever. These numbers can change, but 40% is what I've been using flex time for, like MR reviews, and then of course the other bucket is this new inbound requests thing, right? So that is stuff that can come onto your plate halfway through a milestone. And in terms of these larger things that we have control over, where we are creating tickets, we are creating sub tickets, the theory, the way that I want to approach it is it's a discrete chunk of work. You're breaking it down into another task if you at the point that you realize that it could be more. we can get into like, okay, how does the parent structure work, and is it an epic and all of that? But if we can just at least take a tiptoe towards issues that are, thematically achievable within a milestone by a single person is a task, and you can use all of the other features like the labeling, the weighting. I think we'll already be a lot farther than we are now. If this comes up again, if we start having specific cases, let's talk about that specific case, and then we'll go more into what we can do for those.
Is this maybe something where we should approach it almost more as a like kind of cultural triage practice in the team and say like, hey, every issue needs to have an assignee and have a milestone. And if that person thinks that scope of work is too big for a milestone, they should work with somebody to break it down into smaller pieces, as opposed to having a prescribed kind of hierarchy or tree structure for it.
I think I understand what you're saying, and I think the answer is yes. So I was talking to a couple people about that today. The way that I would like to start on this, rather than doing like create some kind of rules and enforce those rules, is more start from where we are today. And where we are today is you do already have quite a few issues assigned to you. So just looking at like 18.9 and 18.10, take a look at the issues that you feel some kind of ownership on, and just look at them and go, is this a general ticket that needs subtickets? And if yes, help create those. All of you go out and do that now. Help create those, because as I mentioned, like Chris and I aren't going to turn into people that just sit in GitLab and create all the structure and enforce it and have all of that. What we believe is that you're all, we're doing this to help you, and you're all owners and you're all very smart. So the idea is, hey, I've noticed this needs a design task. Therefore the weighting doesn't work. Help us create those child's issues. And yeah, start where we are today. Start with like cultural change. I want you all to take ownership over this. It's not me just saying you've got to do this. It's like, you should feel like this makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, let's change it. But here's an example. We have an issue assigned to Mark that is like, fix UX issues in date picker. It's not achievable, right? It's not even a thing. And there's probably, first of all, it's not achievable in a single milestone. Second of all, what UX issues specifically? Third of all, there's probably design that needs to be involved in that, right? So we need sub-tickets for each of those. And then those sub-tickets are the ones that are actually assigned to you. So what he's actually going to be doing this milestone is understanding the current ask, breaking it down into subtasks, not actually implementing anything, but the ticket doesn't make that clear. The ticket feels like an outcome that is a full implementation of it. And we're in this state now because we're not starting from scratch, right? So yes, we do need you all to start where we are today and take ownership and do the cultural change. Does anyone have opinions on issues or tasks? I'm leaning just to say issues because that seems to make sense. But like, is there a reason why we should use tasks for this instead?
Let me answer that question with another question. Has anyone ever used task like in a bigger team or at all? Like I remember that did not exist yet when I joined, so they're only 2-3 years old. So I hadn't had the chance to fully embrace tasks. So is that different for anyone?
So I've used tasks briefly for part of the Vue 3 migration. It was something Ilya set up. It was smoke testing GitLab UI components for compatibility with Vue 3. And so tasks were used as very lightweight sort of, you assign yourself a task and your sole job is to just close the task once you've smoke tested the thing. Like there's no discussion needed and so on. So in that respect, it was just treated like a very lightweight issue.
Yeah.
And the UI at the time, anyway, I have no idea if it's changed. It presumably has because of work items. Well, no, there must have been implemented work items, but I think work items have changed quite a bit since then. The UI back then made that quite streamlined. I don't know if that's still true.
I can just give you the context of why I think issues. If we go all the way down to tasks, there's kind of nothing below that. But if you are in an issue and you want a task, it's still available to you. The issues seem to have all the features. Like a lot of the discussion that I've heard is, can we do this with tasks? Can we do that with tasks? And we know with issues that the answer is yes, you can do all of those things with issues. So unless that there's a strong reason, like I find creating issues too cumbersome, then I would say, sure, let's do tasks. But if you're okay moving forward with issues, and if an issue is assigned to you and you need a bunch of subtasks, like Mark was talking about, just to kind of track your work, they would still be available to you because we hadn't gone all the way down to that basement.
Yeah, when we were in the paper cuts team, because I was partnered closely with the plan people, I was trying to dog food these things. And kind of the extent to which I ever used tasks and it was not consistent was for my own personal breakdown of the tasks required to do an issue if the issue was large, you know? But I don't think I ever used them in like a collaborative way. I think it was always basically making a checklist for myself that was not a literal checklist in the description in the markdown.
Let's go forward with issues for now. Tasks are still available to you in this regard. So the ask of all of you is to look at what's assigned to you, and as you see other stuff come in, if your thought is, hey, this really needs split up, do so. The last question was around, I think Dan has it here as well. So the descriptions and the discussions. Who has feels on where these things should happen? So if we have a main issue and we realize that there's both design and engineering involved, we create child issues. It allows you to weight them. It allows you to assign them to different milestones, to different people. That's great. It just creates an issue where you're kind of like, where do we keep the description? Do we have descriptions in all of them? And do we have discussions in all of them? Or do we enforce something? Do we just say everything should be in the parent and only stuff in the individual ticket is specific to that ticket? Who has seen this go well or poorly? This is a pretty, I've had this come up in pretty much every org I've ever.
This is, I mean, maybe kind of a naive happy path for it, but like if you have a main issue and let's say you break out an issue for design, I think it's natural for some conversation about design decisions to happen in that design issue, but then there's some sort of sharing back into the main issue that maybe is a digest of parts from the design conversation that are relevant to the larger effort so that you don't have to go back and read the whole design issue, but if you want to, there's a link to go do it. Feels like kind of the natural way to do this.
It's the mature way, and it's using all of the tickets in the way properly rather than having an empty ticket and a full ticket. Like and I think it's the right path, but it requires work on all of your parts. And if you do it, and then I think it works, but you're having to in the moment go, I think part of this discussion should be moved to the parent. So that's just the ask of you. Like, are you willing to do that or no?
I'd suggest that's something that happens when you close the issue. Right, when you complete the design issue or the engineering issue or the planning issue, maybe that's when we use Duo to summarize the outcome and paste it back into the main description.
It also feels natural if in that design process, if there's some kind of blocker that needs clarification or needs to be brought to the team, go back to that main issue and say, hey, we ran into this thing. It feels natural that, I mean, does it make it easier to do if that main issue is kind of explicitly kind of thought of as like, I don't know, like the discussion issue or something, the meta issue about it?
I like the idea of the main issue being the single source of truth. So discussions can happen elsewhere, but they must be reflected in the main issue. Something where I saw this work very well, a place where I saw this work very well was in the Project Studio. There was a wiki. I'm not saying we should use wikis, but on that wiki page, there was a decision register, which I think was really nice. And maybe that's only sensible for quite a large project, but the idea was every decision, wherever it was discussed, would be recorded and logged there. And that made it a really nice sort of central place to sort of check things. So I would like for us to do that. But yeah, that's naive happy path, as Chad said, maybe.
Well, let's try it. I mean, it really only just takes people who are willing to do that extra up cut and paste or that extra up summarization. If we find it's not getting done, then let's deal with it then and try to figure out specifically why. Like, is it that we need automation? Is it that we just need reminders? Is it that there needs to be a specific point of time? Like Chris said, like it happens when you close it, or is it just, on the fly? But it's a mature team. You've all been in the industry forever. Like, what information is useful for the other team members, and we're all on the same team, right? It's not like it's cross team. So let's try it. It's the quote unquote correct way of doing it. And so if it works, then I think it'll be the most complete and flexible and usable. Cool. So we will continue to make the milestone planning and all of that more robust and more clear. We're also going to start to move some of the dates around in our Epics roadmap now that we've taken on some bigger boulders into the team. So that's to come. Chris and I are going to do that. But what really helps with that is obviously having all these tickets and having them scoped and all of that. So please help us now that we have these decisions. Just make sure that the tickets that you are assigned to you make sense. They're achievable in this milestone, that they're assignable to just a single person. Dan, do you want to go through this one? You have stuff about work moving through the group, or was that part of the original discussion?
We can skip it because I realized that I don't know how work is supposed to move through our group. So I don't know if we can answer should issues align with that.
Okay, I think I tangentially talked about that. Chris and I are still working on that. Like we're moving more with our planning, and I think we're still being fairly flexible in terms of like specifics of the work moves through. Let's revisit that.
All right, then let's move on to the CRUD component discussion here. The intent behind this is mostly to kind of come back to where we were before the holidays. Essentially, we've all been off for a number of weeks and we don't want to lose momentum on moving forward on this component. In the past, this is sort of the time when we take a break and don't come back to something for 6 months. And so that's what I want to avoid happening here. And so really the main question is sort of what do we need to get moving? Are there any decisions that we need to take? Is there any discussion that we can have to identify, okay, what's the minimum we need to get this into the design system here? Dan, both Thomas shared a summary before the holiday. That's great to read. And Dan has shared a number of things in line here. I would suggest the useful place for us to focus would be on this question of what doesn't have the whole team's consensus, what we need to move forward with. Does that seem like a good place to start, everyone here? All right, great. So the first point here is I guess around the name of this component itself. I think before the holidays, we were calling this thing an index container. And it was not clear if that was something that needed to, if that was going to work for everyone.
I think there was no objection, so not
sorry,
like I think there was no objection to index container. It was actually the thing we in the end kind of agreed on, because like to go one step back, I started calling in the MVC the thing what embedded list, because the documentation page from which this started was called like this. But yeah, index container I think can work since it's a container around something.
To be clear, Thomas, on these points, I think me and you on these four, I think we're okay, like we're aligned on it, is my understanding, but it's outside of the two of us who've been working on it. There's questions and concerns about the name, but I feel confident moving forward with it.
Okay, so then I think I misunderstood this bullet point. I thought these are things that we don't have the consensus on. But if Dan, if you and Thomas are in agreement on these 4 points, then I don't think we need to discuss it.
There's maybe another.
Go ahead, Paul.
There's maybe another framing, then another question. The way that I understood it was like we had turned a corner on this. We're pretty far along with this, and we're getting comfortable with it to the point where we would like to open an MR against the design system and get the component in. In order to do so, though, it probably makes sense to try to battle test it or migrate a few in-product usages to use it. And it helps with reviews. It helps make sure we're heading down the right path, that there's not going to be a bunch of API changes later. In order to do that, I think we needed to identify some in-product usages, and that's where I think we kind of got stuck because of where we're at with it, right? This opinionated kind of question in terms of like, we kind of got to the point where there wasn't any in-product migration. So the question became, do we work on it a little bit more so that it has more functionality that would match some in-product usages? Or do we look at some of the in-product usages and work with those teams in order to the in-product usage more match the more minimal version? And if we were able to get a few of these, then we would be able to move forward with getting it into the design system, then the minimum version. Is that kind of a summary of where we kind of got slowed down?
As I'm make sure I'm understanding this, the question seems to be, we can't identify any easy migrations. So do we adjust the spec to make those migrations easier, or do we move forward with our ideal and no migrations? Is that the decision point?
Well, I think some of the in-product usages are very, very close, and we could maybe get those in-product usages to more match what we've done, right? There's some differences of like how they're creating new, like I guess the way that I had thought about it from what I understood, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is like we just need some migrations in order to be more confident with it, right? Am I right about that, Thomas?
In a way, but like while looking for, let's say, migration targets or like consumers, I learned more and more what probably others already were aware of, like Sasha and so on, that were more in closer to the CRUD component, because there is not one uniform use, right? Like for in this implementation of this new thing, one of the things we put effort in was that when you click the add, like to add a new thing, that the form goes inline and that this looks good and that you can close it and that this is accessible and all of that. But turns out many CRUD components have many more buttons than just an add button. Some don't have an add button, right? Like, and at the same time, there's often or sometimes reasons to not show it inline, but differently because the form is so big or something, right? Like it felt a bit, we designed something that is not in the one way too strict and trying to do too many things at once. So like it was, as an engineer, not really clear what is it we want, right? Like, do we want everything inline and this huge effort of big effort to kind of migrate a couple of usages to that, which means work in the product, sometimes semi-complex, let's say, to move how the form opens and whatnot? Or do we want to like cater to the product and say, okay, this component is that flexible, but then this whole hardwiring of the new form shows inline seems a bit kind of trying an ideal that already failed, right? Like when you look in what happens in the product. So I wouldn't want to merge a component to the core layer where we find zero usage for. So that sounds not a path I want to go down, because then we maintain something that no one can use. And at the same time, like the other end of the spectrum to me would be like to allow what the CRUD component I think also does in most places, that you kind of instead use a slot, right? That you kind of put all this built-in logic aside and say, instead of that add button, there is a slot where you can put whatever. That would allow us to roll it out much faster. But at the same time, it's sort of doing the same things, let's say, that the CRUD component did. Like, I don't want to say repeating old mistakes, because it's a very powerful component. but it would still bring us to a spot where it's used in so many different flavors that, again, you don't really have confidence to make, I don't know, some spacing change later between these slots, because you have no idea what people put in these slots, right? And you say, let's make it more mobile friendly and let's wrap things this way around instead of the other way around. You don't really know what's in there, so you don't know how it will look in production. So that's sort of this spectrum on which we were discussing, to give some more context.
Are there places in the product that you think that the version you guys have now could be easily swapped in? Could just start from there, and then see about other use cases and how it can be adjusted, or the uses could be adjusted to match it. Like Paul said, there's a bunch that are close but not quite.
I think there were one or two, but ironically, I think these were the ones that were read-only, or where you kind of avoid the whole "what does the form do" situation, because there is no form. But at the same time, if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't wanna use this for read-only lists, but more for like where you manage a list, which kind of would include a new and edit action. So yeah, one or two candidates, but it felt a bit like almost not the target audience almost.
If I please correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas, but we were looking for the French view component. If we'd built a English view component instead, would that have changed things?
I
Sorry,
think I
can I ask
can't
to clarify, what does that mean?
I typed it down in the agenda. It might be easier to read as a written thing. Let me turn it to numbers.
You mean the Haml view and not the
Yeah.
view, JavaScript view?
You got it.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. View versus view. Got it.
Yes.
I think when we were looking at migration targets together, we found lots of suitable candidates, but when we looked at how they were authored in the code, one of the things we bumped into was, oh, this is Haml. We can't do that.
That might be another angle to approach this from. Not sure if it would solve this sort of, how you say, this rule set, or like the ideal usage of this not matching all the Vue.js ones then later on. Like maybe we are just pushing that problem a little bit down the road. Plus another, I guess, solvable thing somehow is in the Haml Ruby Vue components. You don't really have too many JavaScript capabilities, right? It's just plain HTML that it spits out, and all the JavaScript interactivity you need to do with old school event listeners or whatever. So in the end, that thing would not be much more than a static card with a header, right? Like all the form slide in things we thought about using what GL collapse and so on. None of that would really work the same way. So not sure. Like if we remove the form completely, just say it's a card with a list inside, then maybe. But if we want to have it more smarter, then it's hard, I think.
Are there any is there any amount of like extra flexibility that we that you're comfortable with adding to it that we haven't yet, that would open up a few migrations? Like, it feels like there's multiple things we're boxing from both sides. One is that, like, to the point about like adding things, right? So like the interaction for adding things is you click add and it shows up inside, but some of the usages, it pops up in a modal in the product instead. And so the path that I think could make sense is working with some of those teams in the product to say, is a modal required for your implementation? Could we move you to this other implementation? And would that get us a couple of migrations that we could do? But you had also mentioned that there's some extra flexibility that could be added. We may not want to go all the way to slots, but is there a couple of extra things? Some people are using more buttons. It's not just add, it's something else. Is there a way that like we could define some extra bit that we're comfortable with adding to it that then would where would we go if we were to like get this into the product and then iterate on it? What would that iteration look like? And do we need to do that iteration now in order to get more of these migrations done? Like, what's the way out of this impasse that actually gets some percentage of the in-product usages used? And I'm fine going both directions. Like, if we need to add to the component, fine, but like we can go one by one to the consumers and get them to kind of come our direction.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if do we need to let the lack of a migration candidate be a blocker for releasing the component, or is that more something to work with people after we have an early version? Treat them as early adopters to test and validate things, make minor changes, as opposed to forcing a migration first. I mean, in some ways, it feels like we should be delivering like the new baseline for this pattern, not forcing it into the wildly inconsistent world that people have been using for a while.
We need something else to give us confidence, I believe, is the main issue, right, Thomas? Like, if it's not migrations, it has to be something, some reason that we wouldn't put this into the product and then drastically change the API as we do this work that you're talking about with the consumers. Like, we want some realization that this is a real, solution to something.
I mean, there must be candidates, right? The last time I checked, we have around 80-ish usages in the JavaScript Vue implementation, and around like 85 to 90 on the Haml Vue component side. So there must be more than one candidate of those to be migrated, no? Like, otherwise the API might be too small for people to start using it, or
Yeah, I
like,
think
what is the reason behind that?
if there are like 180 instances of this and there are only a handful of places where the component that we're thinking of would actually work, then it feels like there's a mismatch between the product's needs and what we're doing.
I mean, the one part is like and I think that's like the lack of people finding the documentation for the current CRUD component, because it's not part of the design system, is like one of the problems where we started out as the, like, when we introduced the CRUD component, it was pretty streamlined, right? Like, every single form was inline. Then we had teams moving our implementation to, oh yeah, we want to add more fields and we want to have that in a drawer, or others opted to use like a new page or like a modal. There's like 4 different variants out there, even though it was designed with one specific implementation in mind. Do you guys think like with this component we can ensure that there is only one implementation in terms of that? Because from the history of the CRUD component, it started out as like an inline form, if we just talk about the form part, and then people started to adapting it and went wild with like what they want to do. And this is not like specifically a problem to this new component or the CRUD component, like the overuse of modals and drawers by replacing something has gone wild anyway for like a couple of years now. So is this something you try to avoid, that people can opt to use something else? Is that like one of the limitations, or where does this big limitation come from, that we only see like a handful of components could be candidates to be migrated to this component?
Well, a couple of things have to sort of, like, all the stars have to align, right? So there's for sure more than one where it's just an add button, but still that's probably not the majority, but yeah, there are a couple. But not all of them then also treat the counts the same way. Like, there are CRUD components where there is not one count with an icon, but multiple counts with multiple icons. So like,
Yeah.
again, to support this, either you open up a slot, but then people can put anything in there, like, labels, badges, more buttons, whatnot, another CRUD component within the CRUD components header.
I mean, that's basically what the CRUD component has, right? Somebody added like a fallback, a slot, so they can,
but for
more
everything,
into
like I'm
yes,
like half jokingly, you can probably build, I don't know, a clock out of the CRUD component because it's like in Minecraft, when you build with redstone, you can build anything. It's a bit like that. It's very flexible, right? But this flexibility then also makes it risky if we later would say, okay, we want to make a change, but how does this change affect all the different things in the wild? So I think that's why we tried to sort of like not open all the slots, but that really scoped us down, because you need like a usage where there is only an add button that is inline, that doesn't conflict, like with an edit action in a modal, which is also like weird UX, honestly, if you have the new action sliding in, but if you edit the thing, it pops up, right? Like that also has technical challenges, because I found at least one implementation where there was like the form and the event listeners of the form that were really like baked into a modal, right? Like if I had to make it inline, I wouldn't do it, because it was very deep in the product, where it was like, okay, this is kind of someone who knows what they're doing should do that. But so like, like you can prepare that, but
I seen wild things out in the wild anyway, where we use like inside of an inline form, there's another CRUD component in the form itself. But yeah, like I guess like these are use cases we even with this new component, we can only add documentation that you shouldn't do it, but there isn't a way to avoid like misuse of a component completely, right?
Yeah. That's my understanding too, that like a lot of these usages are just not going to be covered by that, and that's totally fine. But also zero usages feels like that doesn't make any sense either, right? So like how can we get this number up? Do we need to add in another little bit of scope or another little bit of flexibility before we merge? Do we need to work with a few consumers to get rid of some of the extra changes that they've done? Or to Chris's point, do we just merge it in now? And that, like, it doesn't feel like we should stay stuck in this point. So that's just where I want to be able to move forward. And it's like what's the need? Like, do we need to feel like it's okay to open this up a little bit more? Like the component itself, a bit more flexibility. Like, have we boxed ourselves in? Is it us, or is it something else?
Yeah, it might be us, Paul, but some of the examples that we shared earlier for like multiple count, that's one out of
that's out.
140.
Yeah.
Multiple
Exactly.
buttons, that's that's 4 that I could find out of the 140, and 3 of those were for view options, and we put in a plan for how we could solve for that in the future. I'd love to work alongside teams to get this forward, help them work on these complex and important interactions for users, where they're trying to get something done, they're trying to complete a task, and they're presented with UI that looks the same across the product but behaves dramatically differently every time they come across it. A couple of times we've mentioned CRUD component migrations. I want to be really explicit that I don't think the goal of this component is for CRUD component migrations. There's already a huge number that don't fit this, where they're just used to group a form. That's not what this new component is for, and it's not what the original CRUD component is for. But I am confident that there's a significant, like more than 40 across French view and English view that would meet this pattern, with some changes to the creation aspect, like we've got.
How you go. Given that, because I agree, I know we're over time, but I think we're right at the solution here. I agree that I do think some of the product implementations could be reined in and match this, and I think that's a good path forward. To Chris's question, should we be doing that pre-merging? Should we start identifying some of these? Should we go out, meet with them? or are we very like, where's our confidence level with the current API? If we were to just merge it in now into pajamas, because then it's actually available to be used for these migrations that we're talking about. Are we confident? And because we're doing the migrations or supporting some of these usages, like we'll still be kind of white glove in some ways. So if we do need to drastically change the API, it's still under our control. It hasn't escaped, from us just yet. Are we close to that or no? Like, I don't want us to merge something that we're not happy. Like, I fully support Thomas in that regard. It does not make sense to merge something that's got no usages and it isn't smart. So it feels like there's a confidence issue to solve, and then there's working with teams, identifying these 40 components, usages, and working with those teams. Spitting up issues. The engineering side can help with some of these as well, some of these migrations. Like, we can create these subtickets that we're talking about for a lot of these usages and just kind of systematically work through them. What's the order of operations, I guess, for the first few steps?
So for a detailed plan, I would need to kind of wrap my head around it. This again, it's like 3 weeks ago. But
Yeah.
I think I left it in a pretty decent state, like except for the
Yep.
rename. So like I think
Yep.
the very first thing would be agree on the name and never ever change it again. Not because it's a bit of a pain to rename it once, but if it's in the design system, we can just rename things so easily. That is, I guess, step 0, that we agree on this index container or what it is, or Mark's suggestion with component 0001. I like that name too. Maybe even better. But then I can do that rename. It's not hard, but a bit annoying with underscore and camel case, and like all the CSS classes are currently named like that. But
Yeah.
mechanical, I can probably do that with Duo, and it's done in a few minutes and a few bug fixes. And with that, I can like sort of revive the MR. Probably then remembering a couple of details that I can't remember right now. And one thing, I think I even had that written in that pre-Christmas message of mine. What probably would help with the confidence is if we go ahead a little with the documentation. I think then that was a separate MR. And I think if we are, like old colleague of mine coined this once, I'm not sure if it's a term in everywhere in the industry, it's like this documentation-driven development that we say, if the documentation of the component makes sense, then that's implemented like this, right? I would suggest that we rename, update the docs, give the docs to someone and say, would you want to have such a component? And then if everyone says yay, then we are almost there and can give them that component.
What if we identify sort of, 2 or 3 of these potential migrations and reach out to them directly to say, hey, we want to do this in your, we want to get this migrated in your area. And we sort of use them to build the first, not build, but, build confidence through their direct feedback and how well it would work for them. I'm more thinking, a direct reach out to the close areas instead of like a wider set of feedback, I guess.
I think that makes sense, and I think there's work in flight. I don't think we need to be. I don't think it would be. I think it would be easy to not be limited to existing implementations. I see some of the stuff plans working on that is almost just waiting for this to be here. I see the stuff the settings working group is working on, where a lot of this kind of pattern pops up. So I think we can do both: rework existing and pay down some of the debt, and also work with teams who are actively building and implementing.
Okay, so we've got renaming, reviving the MR, and I know Thomas had a lot of comments in the MR. So helping him kind of resolve those if they're from any of you. Docs and reaching out to a few teams. Those seem like simple things that we can put into place.
All right, great. I will I'll try and summarize this discussion, add these action points back into the issue itself so that it is tracked there. Yeah, I think
Thanks.
that's mostly it here. Yeah, Thomas?
No, just thanks, Chris, for for doing the summary and leading this to a good result, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy we've got a way forward. And thanks everyone for staying late and jumping in on the discussion here. I appreciate everyone being involved with it. All right, with that, we will end things here for today. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the day, and we will see you all later.
Thanks.